She has drugs in her bag. The flight attendant's voice echoed sharply through the first-class cabin, full of unwavering certainty as she pointed directly at the only black woman on board. That woman has drugs. An unsettling silence fell over the cabin immediately. For several tense seconds, all eyes shifted toward Crystal, suspicion and curiosity flaring visibly on each passenger's face. Phones quickly lifted, capturing the drama unfolding right before their eyes. "I don't understand what you're talking about," Crystal responded calmly, her voice steady despite the heavy gaze of dozens watching and judging her every move. Megan, the flight attendant, confidently lifted the suspicious package high in her hand, her expression radiating victorious satisfaction, completely certain she had just secured her victory. "I'm asking you to cooperate fully with airport security," Megan spoke loudly, intentionally making sure everyone in the cabin could clearly hear each word. Soft whispers rippled through the crowd. Passengers exchanged quick glances, quietly speculating, as Crystal stood slowly, gracefully facing the two approaching security officers. Just as she passed Megan, Crystal paused ever so briefly, leaning closer and whispering softly into the flight attendant's ear, her voice quiet, yet piercingly authoritative. "You have absolutely no idea how big of a mistake you've just made." Megan's smug expression faltered instantly, uncertainty flickering across her face momentarily. But as Crystal calmly walked past her, escorted out of the plane by security, Megan quickly regained her composure, a triumphant smirk returning to her lips. Yet Megan had absolutely no idea that the woman she had framed was no ordinary passenger. Crystal Cole wasn't just another traveler flying first class. She was an undercover, high-ranking CIA agent on an official operation. Megan had unknowingly stepped right into the very trap she herself created, a crucial piece in an ongoing, groundbreaking investigation aimed at exposing both a major drug trafficking network and deep-rooted racism in the airline industry. Before stepping off the plane, Crystal paused briefly and looked back at Megan. Her eyes, firm and unwavering, conveyed a powerful message. "You have no idea how big this mistake truly is." 12 hours earlier, long before the shocking incident shook America, Crystal Cole sat quietly in her hotel room in Los Angeles, meticulously reviewing confidential documents. She had been a dedicated CIA agent for nearly 2 decades, facing dangers in missions across Eastern Europe and the Middle East. Yet, none of her past assignments felt quite as sensitive or deeply personal as this one. Her secured phone buzzed abruptly, displaying the name of her superior, Director Reynolds of the CIA. "Crystal," his voice came through clear and firm, "the airline's CEO has been briefed on your true identity. But besides him, no one else knows you're undercover. To the crew, you're just another first-class passenger. Your mission today is extremely critical. Identify who is leading the drug trafficking network using commercial flights." Crystal answered with quiet determination, "I understand perfectly, Director. I'll report immediately once I confirm the suspects." Reynolds hesitated slightly, his voice becoming more cautious. "Crystal, be careful. We're dealing with highly sophisticated criminals. They'll do whatever it takes to protect their operation." "You don't have to worry, sir," Crystal responded softly, her voice full of confident resolve. "I know exactly how to protect myself." Ending the call, Crystal exited her hotel room and moved seamlessly through the crowded airport. Her trained eyes silently recorded every abnormal detail. The security personnel who seemed inattentive, the suspicious conversation between 2 employees near the coffee shop, the uneasy glances of passengers preparing to board. As she stepped onto the plane, her eyes instantly locked onto Megan Parker, the flight attendant greeting passengers with a practiced smile at the doorway. Megan's name had topped Crystal's suspect list from the moment she received her briefing. With just one glance, Crystal detected Megan's hidden anxiety beneath her professionally rehearsed smile. Megan also noticed Crystal instantly, an uncomfortable feeling rising inside her the moment Crystal stepped into the first-class cabin, a place Megan firmly believed belonged only to certain kinds of people. A malicious thought quickly formed in her mind. This woman doesn't belong here. Perhaps she will be the perfect distraction. As the plane soared into the sky, Megan began executing her dangerous plan, unaware that Crystal was observing her every move from a short distance away. Crystal watched silently, sensing Megan's subtle nervousness, noting the way the flight attendant's hand shook slightly when serving drinks. Then, in the critical moment when Megan secretly placed the drug packet inside Crystal's handbag and loudly accused her before all passengers, Megan suddenly felt a chilling doubt surge within her. Crystal rose calmly from her seat, confidence radiating clearly from her demeanor as she looked Megan straight in the eye. That was the exact moment Megan realized something terribly wrong had occurred. One side stood Megan Parker, confident she'd won. On the other stood Crystal Cole, the mysterious woman with eyes reflecting power and certainty. But what Megan didn't know was this. The seemingly ordinary passenger she had publicly accused wasn't merely an innocent victim. Crystal Cole was in fact one of America's most respected CIA undercover agents. And this seemingly ordinary flight was about to become the defining turning point, forever altering the destiny of everyone aboard. Crystal quietly observed Megan's nervous behavior throughout the flight, sensing the hidden fear behind her forced smiles. Megan's hands trembled slightly whenever she approached Crystal's seat, the subtle signs clearly visible only to Crystal's highly trained eyes. Once filled with dreams of advancement and praise, Megan had started bitterly resenting changes in her industry, particularly when she was overlooked for promotion in favor of Alyssa, a younger black flight attendant whose competence had outshined her own. Faced with mounting financial troubles, Megan accepted an offer to transport illegal substances discreetly during flights. Now facing Crystal's intense gaze, Megan wondered with growing panic. Does she know something? The invisible fear tightened around Megan's chest, growing heavier with each passing moment. But Megan quickly pushed away her doubts, convincing herself that no one could possibly suspect her perfect plan. What Megan didn't realize was the game she thought she was playing had already spun dangerously out of her control. And Crystal was carefully orchestrating every move behind the scenes. If this story has captivated you, keep watching closely, because what happens next is unlike anything you've ever imagined. From her seat, Crystal pretended to read news on her tablet, but her eyes discreetly followed Megan's every move, carefully observing how Megan treated passengers differently based on their skin color. She subtly noted down each detail, the cold stares, the dismissive attitude Megan showed when reluctantly offering her a drink, and especially how Megan blatantly ignored her polite requests. Why is she so tense? Crystal wondered, quickly analyzing the flight attendant's suspicious behavior. Suddenly, she noticed Megan anxiously glancing around the cabin before slipping quietly into the crew restroom, gripping a small bag tightly in her hand. Crystal leaned slightly, pretending to adjust her seatbelt, but in reality, she activated the tiny hidden camera discreetly embedded in her lapel pin, quietly capturing Megan's every move. She instinctively knew something suspicious was happening, and what she needed most was solid proof. A few moments later, Megan returned to the cabin, her hands now empty. Crystal immediately noticed Megan's handbag looked significantly lighter. Her eyes narrowed decisively. A drug drop had just taken place mid-flight, right under the noses of hundreds of sleeping passengers. Just as Crystal prepared to log this crucial evidence into her phone, Megan unexpectedly approached her seat, displaying an oddly forced, insincere smile. Crystal sensed something was deeply wrong, yet outwardly remained as calm as if nothing unusual had happened. "Do you need anything else?" Megan asked coldly, deliberately omitting the respectful "ma'am" she'd used with everyone else. Crystal replied softly, keeping her composure. "I feel a bit cold here. Could you get me a blanket, please?" Megan shot her a contemptuous look, then silently turned away without another word. At that exact moment, Crystal felt a wave of unease rising within her. Years of experience told her clearly that Megan was preparing something dangerous, something to neutralize the threat Crystal clearly posed. What happened next? When Crystal briefly left her seat to use the restroom, and Megan secretly placed the illegal package in Crystal's handbag, was meticulously recorded by the CIA's tiny hidden camera pinned to her lapel. Megan had just made a fatal mistake. What she didn't know was that Crystal had calmly recorded every single moment, patiently waiting for the right time to reveal it to the world. As Crystal stepped out of the restroom, her eyes met Megan's, who had just left Crystal's seat with that fake smile lingering on her lips. In that brief second, Crystal knew with absolute clarity. Megan Parker had stepped right into the trap she herself had laid. A trap that, within mere hours, would irreversibly change Megan's life forever. Outside the airplane window, the sky appeared calm and peaceful. But within the cabin, an unseen storm had just begun. A silent confrontation had officially started between these two women, and only one of them knew for sure she'd already won. Keep watching closely, because what comes next is unlike anything you've ever witnessed. The plane soon entered smoother airspace and the seatbelt sign turned off. Megan stood at the crew station, her breathing shallow, her hands ice-cold from nerves. She tried calming herself by gently rearranging strands of her blonde hair, desperately hoping it would help her regain a bit of confidence. Yet somehow, Crystal's mysterious warning still echoed in her mind, haunting her like a curse she couldn't escape. Beside her, Tyler Jenkins, her coworker and accomplice, immediately noticed Megan's unusual anxiety. "You okay, Meg?" Tyler whispered cautiously, observing her with concern. He'd never seen Megan look so visibly distressed before. Megan bit her lip, her voice trembling slightly despite her efforts to appear calm. "I just feel like that woman knows something. The way she looked at me, it felt like she could see right through me." Tyler shook his head, smiling gently in an attempt to reassure her. "You're being paranoid, Meg. No one suspects anything, especially not some random passenger. Relax, we'll land in Chicago soon, and after that, we're home free." Megan nodded slightly, trying to push away the growing doubts. But as Tyler turned away, her eyes suddenly locked onto Crystal's intense gaze once again. Her heart skipped a beat. Megan knew she couldn't afford to leave this threat unchecked. She had to strike first, before it was too late. In an instant, a bold and dangerous plan took shape in Megan's mind. She quickly retreated into a corner near the crew lavatory, took out her phone, and hastily texted her drug supplier. "A minor issue, but I'll handle it. Don't contact me until I reach out." Taking another quick glance around, Megan inhaled deeply, preparing herself for the risky move ahead. She knew Crystal was watching, but there was no turning back. Megan's plan became crystal clear. Using the passengers' own biases against them, she would convince everyone of the truth they were already predisposed to believe. She hurriedly retrieved a small white packet from her own bag, originally intended to secure enough money to maintain her extravagant, artificial lifestyle for another few months. But now, that packet had a different, critical mission. After carefully scanning her surroundings, Megan approached Crystal's seat as soon as Crystal left for the restroom. Megan's heart pounded wildly as she slipped the packet into Crystal's handbag, her hand trembling from fear and adrenaline. This moment was frightening, but there was no going back now. As Megan returned to the serving station, Tyler leaned in and whispered nervously, "What did you just do?" From her seat, Crystal continued pretending to scroll through the news on her tablet. But secretly, her eyes tracked Megan closely, observing every detail, especially how Megan treated passengers differently based on their appearance. She quietly noted Megan's cold stares, dismissive gestures, and deliberate disregard when Crystal politely asked for help. Why is she so nervous? Crystal wondered silently, her analytical mind racing. At that exact moment, she noticed Megan anxiously scanning the cabin before discreetly slipping into the crew bathroom. Crystal immediately sensed trouble. With practiced calmness, Crystal activated the hidden camera discreetly concealed in her lapel pin, recording Megan's every move. She knew something significant was unfolding, something she had to document clearly to reveal the full truth. Minutes later, Megan emerged empty-handed. Crystal instantly noticed Megan's crew bag appeared noticeably lighter. Before she could document her observation, Megan suddenly approached her seat, wearing an unusually forced smile. A quiet alarm went off in Crystal's mind, yet her expression remained steady. "Can I get you anything?" Megan asked coldly, deliberately omitting the respectful tone she'd used with other passengers. Crystal responded evenly, her voice unwavering. "I feel a bit chilly. Could I have a blanket, please?" Megan hesitated, casting a quick glance around the cabin before nodding reluctantly. As Megan walked away, Crystal felt a growing sense of unease, an intuition sharpened by years of undercover operations. She knew Megan was preparing something dangerous, possibly to eliminate any threat Crystal posed. When Crystal briefly stepped away to the restroom, Megan saw her opportunity. Quickly checking to ensure no one was watching, Megan slipped the small packet of drugs into Crystal's handbag. Her heart raced wildly, but she maintained a facade of calm as she stepped back from Crystal's seat. Returning to her own seat moments later, Crystal immediately noticed Megan's forced smile as she stood nearby, clearly waiting for the right moment to spring her trap. "You sure you're okay, Meg?" Tyler whispered nervously from behind her. Noticing Megan's visibly anxious demeanor. "Relax, Tyler," Megan whispered back harshly. "Remember, sometimes the best way to protect yourself is to make someone else look guilty." Tyler froze, realizing exactly what Megan meant. Fear filled his eyes, but Megan quickly restored her fake charming smile and approached Crystal's seat again, confidently declaring loudly enough for the entire cabin to hear. "I need to check your bag immediately, ma'am. We suspect you're carrying illegal substances." All eyes snapped toward Crystal. Phones instantly lifted, filming the tense confrontation unfolding. Crystal knew exactly what was happening. She calmly rose from her seat, her eyes steadily locking onto Megan, whose hands trembled slightly as she dramatically pulled a small package of drugs from Crystal's handbag. "What is this?" Megan exclaimed dramatically, raising the drugs high for all passengers to see. Murmurs of shock and disbelief filled the cabin. Crystal remained composed, her voice calm and controlled. "Are you absolutely sure about what you're doing, Miss Parker?" Megan's heart skipped a beat, her face briefly reflecting shock upon hearing Crystal call her by name. How could she possibly know my name? But Megan quickly regained her arrogant demeanor, confidently ordering airport security personnel to escort Crystal to the rear of the plane for questioning. As security escorted her away, Crystal paused briefly beside Megan, leaning slightly closer, and whispered quietly yet forcefully, "You have no idea who you're dealing with, but soon you'll find out." Megan stood frozen, momentarily shaken by Crystal's cryptic threat. She watched Crystal leave, feeling a sudden chill run down her spine. For the first time, Megan felt the seriousness of what she'd done, though she quickly brushed her doubts aside. As Crystal walked quietly to the back of the aircraft, passengers whispered, their eyes following her every move. "Can't believe someone like that would do something so bold," one older man muttered loud enough for Crystal to hear. She ignored the remark, keeping her head high and expression composed. Years as a CIA agent had trained her to endure prejudice silently and patiently, always waiting for the right moment to bring the truth to light. At the back of the plane, Crystal was seated near the crew station. The lead airport security officer, a middle-aged man, approached, clearly nervous. "I need your identification and documents," he said firmly. Without hesitation, Crystal handed him a sleek black card, showing only a government insignia and a phone number. Puzzled, the security officer stared at the card. "What's this?" "Call that number," Crystal instructed calmly but authoritatively. "Tell them you're detaining Crystal Cole." The officer hesitated but quickly obeyed. After a brief call, his expression shifted from confusion to outright alarm. "Yes, sir. Understood. Right away, sir." He stammered into the phone before turning anxiously back toward Crystal, his tone now completely different. I'm so sorry, ma'am. We had no idea who you were." Crystal remained composed, simply nodding as she replied gently, yet firmly, "It's all right. But now you understand the gravity of what's happening here. This is much bigger than you realize." Back in the cabin, Megan sat confidently, convinced she'd successfully eliminated any threat to her operation. She had no idea she had just set herself up for disaster. High above the clouds, the airplane sailed calmly forward, but deep inside its quiet cabin, an invisible storm had begun. A storm that would expose truths long hidden, bringing justice to those who least expected it. Stay tuned, because what unfolds next will change everything forever. It was exactly the complication Crystal needed to unravel this entire criminal network. She quietly opened her secure phone, quickly texting Director Reynolds, "Step 1 complete. Get ready for major news." Meanwhile, back in the first-class cabin, Megan couldn't hide the self-satisfied smile spreading across her face. Tyler, sitting beside her, leaned in nervously and whispered, "Don't you think this might have been too much? We've never publicly accused someone like this before." Megan smiled coldly, her voice filled with confident arrogance. That's exactly why it will work perfectly. After today, no one will suspect us again. Everyone will see me as a hero, and that woman as nothing but a criminal. Stop being so weak, Tyler. If you want a better life, you have to accept risks. Tyler fell silent, his heart heavy with anxiety. Something about this time felt different, more dangerous. Yet, Megan's boldness was contagious, temporarily calming his fears. Neither realized that at the back of the plane, the situation was already turning against them in a way they never anticipated. Megan casually picked up her phone, scrolling through social media. Thousands of views, hundreds of shares, all praising her for exposing a supposed drug smuggler. See? Megan bragged softly to Tyler. Now everyone thinks I'm a hero. Suddenly, a message flashed onto Megan's screen from her drug supplier. What you did is too risky. You're drawing unwanted attention. Megan frowned deeply, quickly texting back, everything's under control. Don't worry, I can handle it. But contrary to Megan's confidence, Crystal, sitting calmly at the back of the plane, had just connected with Director Reynolds. Crystal, this incident has escalated beyond our initial expectations. Are you ready? Reynolds asked, his tone serious. I'm always ready, sir, Crystal replied firmly. Let me handle this personally. As the call ended, Crystal rose quietly, determination blazing in her eyes. Megan Parker wasn't the end target, but she would serve as the crucial first domino, helping Crystal topple an entire criminal network. Crystal decided not to rush. She would let Megan savor her false victory just a little longer before pulling back the curtain to reveal the ugly truth beneath. The plane cruised calmly above serene clouds, the peaceful landscape below contrasting sharply with the fierce storm brewing in each character's heart. Crystal wondered silently if Megan was prepared for the harsh reality she was about to face. Megan Parker, the seemingly untouchable flight attendant, was about to learn the hardest lesson of her life. Keep watching, because behind every perfect facade lies a truth powerful enough to shatter everything you believe. The sky was bathed in a vivid red sunset as the plane descended toward Washington Dulles International Airport. Crystal sat tall in her seat, her gaze fixed outward, but her mind focused entirely on the dangerous game Megan had just begun. Each heartbeat was calm and steady, like a chess player preparing for her final decisive move, a game Megan had no chance of winning. As the plane touched down, Crystal glanced one final time toward Megan, who stood by the exit door, wearing an exaggerated expression of false victory. Yet Crystal clearly sensed that Megan wasn't nearly as comfortable as she pretended. Beneath that confident facade, hidden worry was beginning to surface, as though Megan herself felt something was terribly wrong. Two security officers politely approached, quietly signaling Crystal to follow them off the aircraft. Crystal stood gracefully, calmly donning her jacket, and walked steadily past the curious passengers. She passed Megan again, their eyes meeting briefly. Megan flashed a triumphant smile, which immediately faded when she saw Crystal's composed and completely unshaken expression. Stepping onto the tarmac, a sleek black government vehicle awaited her. Two men in dark suits quickly approached, respectfully nodding toward Crystal as she entered the car. As soon as the door closed, one of the agents reported urgently, "Agent Cole, Director Reynolds is waiting for you immediately at Langley. Everything has been arranged." Crystal nodded quietly as the vehicle sped toward CIA headquarters, the darkness slowly covering the city streets. Her mind meticulously pieced together every detail of the flight. Subtle clues, suspicious behavior, and most importantly, Megan's blatant racial profiling, all integral parts of the greater puzzle she'd carefully constructed. At Langley, Crystal swiftly navigated through multiple security checkpoints, entering a highly secure conference room where Director Reynolds and senior analysts were already waiting. On the large central screen, footage from Crystal's hidden camera played clearly, showing Megan secretly planting the drugs. "This evidence is undeniable," Reynolds said solemnly. "But the problem doesn't end with Megan Parker. We believe this is part of a larger network involving several other airlines." Crystal stepped toward the screen, analyzing the footage carefully. Megan unwittingly revealed their biggest weakness. They weaponize racial stereotypes to deflect suspicion. Unfortunately for her, she had no idea who she was challenging. Reynolds turned to her, impressed yet concerned. So what's our next move, Crystal? Crystal gave a slight, confident smile as she calmly answered, "Let them walk right into their own trap. I want a face-to-face meeting with the airline executives first thing tomorrow. It's time we force them to confront the harsh truth they've been avoiding." Director Reynolds nodded approvingly, though his voice was cautious. "I trust you fully. But remember, this isn't just about catching criminals. It's about confronting deep-rooted prejudice and an entrenched system of cover-ups." Crystal met his gaze seriously, speaking with unwavering conviction. "Exactly. And that's why this case must become a clear example that justice doesn't spare anyone, no matter how powerful or influential they may be." As the meeting ended, Crystal walked out of the room with a mix of pride and anticipation. Ahead of her lay the greatest challenge of her career, not just catching the guilty, but sparking a profound change within society itself. It was an enormous responsibility, yet this was exactly why she'd chosen this path: to defend justice, even when it meant facing danger, unfairness, and prejudices like Megan's. Meanwhile, at the airport, Megan stepped off the plane confidently, laughing cheerfully with coworkers, unaware that federal agents were secretly watching her from a distance. One agent quietly spoke into his radio. "Subject Megan Parker confirmed. Initiate next steps." Megan looked up into the night sky, breathing a sigh of relief, believing herself safe. But in reality, every action she had taken had been carefully documented, and the worst was yet to come. Megan had no idea that, just miles away, Crystal and her specialized team were already preparing the next phase of their undercover operation, ready to dismantle this criminal conspiracy once and for all. The dangerous game had officially begun, and Megan, who thought herself in control, was already ensnared within the invisible web she had woven herself. And the woman holding every string was none other than Crystal Cole. Keep watching closely, because this is just the beginning. The most shocking secrets and darkest conspiracies are about to unfold right before your eyes. The next morning, with dawn barely breaking over a chilly Washington, D.C., Megan entered the crew lounge, her heart swelling with pride as coworkers applauded enthusiastically. Her familiar, self-satisfied smile returned when colleagues eagerly surrounded her, praising her actions. "Megan, you're a celebrity now," one colleague cheered. "Your video is all over the internet." "I was just doing my job," Megan replied with false modesty, secretly basking in her newfound glory. "What matters most is keeping everyone safe." Just then, Tyler appeared, his expression tense. He leaned in, whispering urgently, "You have to stop this now. Things are getting out of control. The FBI contacted me this morning. They want to meet privately and ask a few questions." Megan frowned, momentarily irritated before quickly reassuring him. "Relax, Tyler. They're just doing their due diligence. There's no evidence against us. Stick to the plan, understand?" Tyler reluctantly nodded, his eyes betraying deep concern. Megan ignored his unease, returning happily to her colleagues and savoring the false heroism provided by social media. Another coworker excitedly announced, "CEO Hamilton just emailed. He wants a special meeting today to officially recognize our crew's heroic actions." Applause erupted throughout the room. Megan felt like her dreams were finally coming true. All the stress, debt, and pressure seemed to fade away instantly. In that moment, she truly believed her life was about to change forever. But at the headquarters of Atlantic Airways, the atmosphere inside the emergency meeting was tense and grim, sharply contrasting with Megan's joyful ignorance. CEO Richard Hamilton stared pale-faced at the video evidence Crystal had just presented. "How did this happen right under our noses?" Hamilton asked, his voice trembling slightly. "We've just created the worst scandal in our airline's history." Crystal spoke calmly, her voice authoritative yet understanding. "This isn't just Megan Parker's individual responsibility. The deeper issue here is a workplace culture that allowed behavior like this to go unchecked for too long. You have an opportunity here to make a real change, Mr. Hamilton." CEO Hamilton nodded slowly, releasing a tense sigh. Turning to his PR director, he spoke decisively. "Organize an immediate company-wide meeting. I want every available crew member there in a few hours, and specifically invite Megan Parker. We're going to give her a recognition ceremony she'll never forget." Back at the airport, Megan remained unaware of the trap closing around her. She stood confidently before a mirror, rehearsing her carefully crafted lines filled with fake modesty, preparing for the recognition ceremony she believed would change her life. I was simply doing what anyone would do. Ensuring passenger safety is always my top priority. At that moment, Megan's phone buzzed sharply. A message appeared from an unknown number. "You'd better disappear before it's too late. Everything is about to come out." Megan's hands trembled violently as an icy chill spread through her body. She quickly deleted the text message, inhaling deeply to steady herself. "Someone's just messing with me," she whispered, desperately trying to reassure herself. But a dark anxiety had already started seeping into her thoughts, overshadowing the bright confidence she had briefly enjoyed. Hours later, Megan entered the meeting room, forcing herself to appear confident, yet tension was clearly visible on her face. The large room was crowded, everyone waiting expectantly. Megan took her seat in the front row, quickly scanning the room. Her heart skipped when she saw several unfamiliar faces standing quietly near the doors. Anxiety tightened her chest. CEO Hamilton stepped onto the podium, casting a stern, cold glance directly at Megan. His voice was severe, sending chills down Megan's spine. "We're here today to discuss a very serious incident involving Flight 237. Megan realized immediately this wasn't the recognition ceremony she'd expected. A dreadful premonition rose within her, almost stopping her heart entirely. Suddenly, the doors opened and Crystal entered with undeniable authority and strength, her piercing gaze fixed directly on Megan. Hamilton spoke slowly and deliberately, ensuring everyone heard each word clearly. "Allow me to introduce Special Agent Crystal Cole of the CIA. She recorded everything that happened on that flight, and the truth is dramatically different from what Megan Parker has claimed." The room plunged into a tense, stunned silence. Megan sat frozen, the world around her blurring as her body turned rigid, all eyes fixated on her, curiosity turning quickly to suspicion, then finally to outrage. Crystal stepped forward calmly. Her voice was steady, yet it carried the weight of absolute integrity, cutting directly into Megan's heart like an irreversible judgment. "Megan Parker, your game is officially over." Megan could only sit there, engulfed in despair and fear, realizing the false glory she had built was crumbling completely. Whispered accusations and sharp judging stares grew louder, drowning out all other sounds, pushing her from her momentary fame straight into the darkest abyss she'd ever imagined. Keep watching closely, because the highest climax, the most shocking revelation, is yet to come. The harsh truth will finally be fully exposed. The meeting room was utterly frozen in shock following Crystal's announcement. Every eye was locked onto Megan, whose face had turned pale, stripped entirely of her earlier confidence. Whispers buzzed, and piercing glances stabbed into Megan's heart like sharp needles. Standing confidently on stage, Crystal continued calmly yet firmly. "What you all witnessed from Megan Parker was not bravery. It was a dangerous deception intended to manipulate everyone. Megan exploited racial biases, betrayed your trust, and, most disturbingly, deliberately ruined innocent lives to protect her own criminal activities." As Crystal spoke, she projected crystal-clear video footage onto the large screen, showing Megan secretly planting the drugs in Crystal's bag. The video played in slow motion, undeniable in its clarity, leaving everyone speechless. The same coworkers who had applauded Megan moments before now covered their mouths in disbelief, unable to accept what they were seeing. Amid the stunned silence, Tyler suddenly jumped up in panic, frantically searching for an escape route. 2 federal agents swiftly blocked his path. He turned to Megan, his voice trembling, completely losing control. "She forced me into it. Megan said nobody would suspect us. She promised it'd be simple. I never wanted any part of this." "You liar," Megan screamed, leaping to her feet, her eyes blazing with fury. "You approached me. You said we could make easy money, that no one would ever know." The audience watched in shock as the heated argument unfolded before their eyes. Crystal stood still, intentionally allowing the truth to surface naturally as the culprits turned on each other. "Shut up, Megan. You've ruined everything. I won't go to prison for you," Tyler yelled desperately. At that instant, Megan lunged toward Tyler, but federal agents swiftly restrained her. Chaos erupted as chairs scraped and voices shouted. Megan struggled fiercely, screaming, "Let me go. You're believing her just because she has a CIA badge? You're all the same, always protecting people like her. Crystal slowly approached Megan, her gaze no longer cold but filled with genuine pity, mixed with disappointment. Miss Parker, you chose this path. You alone made yourself untrustworthy. Your prejudice didn't just harm others, it destroyed you. Megan stared back, tears finally overflowing, her voice bitter and broken. Why you? Why were you on that flight? If you hadn't shown up, everything would still be fine. Crystal gently shook her head, her voice compassionate yet firm. No, Megan. Nothing was ever fine. You were only fooling yourself. Sooner or later, the truth always emerges. At that moment, 2 federal agents escorted Tyler and Megan from the meeting room. Megan glanced desperately back at her colleagues one last time, but no one would meet her eyes. Everyone turned away, their faces filled with disappointment and disgust, as though she had become a total stranger. CEO Hamilton stood quietly for a long moment before turning toward Crystal, his voice heavy with contemplation. I honestly don't know what to say right now, but I recognize this is our moment to change, not just our management practices, but the entire culture of this airline. Crystal nodded gently, her eyes shining with quiet resolve as she replied calmly. Mr. Hamilton, this isn't just a story about Megan Parker or even myself. It's about how we've allowed prejudice to silently persist for so long that it became a tool for crime. It's time we take real action, not to salvage an airline's reputation, but to safeguard human dignity, something we must all learn to value deeply. A profound silence filled the meeting room. Each person reflected quietly on their own responsibilities and failings, realizing with shame how their inaction had contributed to the tragedy they'd witnessed. As Crystal stepped out of the meeting room, daylight flooded the corridor, sunlight softly filtering through tall glass windows. Her heart wasn't entirely at ease, knowing the battle wasn't completely over. But she took comfort knowing she'd brought justice closer for those continually targeted by prejudice. Across town, Megan was placed into a waiting black car, the door closing behind her like a final, fateful bell. The life she'd envisioned, the perfect life she'd so carefully constructed, had completely vanished, replaced now by a gray emptiness. She knew she'd lost everything. Keep watching closely, because this story isn't over yet. The last remaining secrets are about to emerge, and the road to justice is still full of surprises. The cold, harsh lights in the FBI interrogation room shone brightly on Megan's face, trapping her in what felt like an endless nightmare. Her typically perfect blonde hair was now tangled, her eyes swollen and tearful, revealing her absolute desperation. Her hands clenched tightly, trembling as if desperately trying to grasp the shattered remnants of her life. Sitting across from Megan, a female FBI agent placed a tablet quietly on the table, her gaze sharp but not without empathy. Her voice was firm yet understanding. Megan Parker, the evidence against you is overwhelming. It's time you come clean. Telling the truth is your only way out. Megan remained silent, struggling to swallow the fear rising in her throat. She glanced anxiously toward the one-way mirror, wondering who was watching from the other side. Finally overwhelmed, she broke her silence, her voice filled with desperation. I didn't have a choice. I was just trying to survive. You have no idea the pressure I was under. The FBI agent interrupted Megan firmly yet compassionately. We all have choices, Miss Parker, but you chose the wrong path. Not only trafficking illegal substances, but using racial prejudice as a shield for your criminal activities. You violated more than the law, you've broken basic moral standards. Megan closed her eyes, tears streaming down her pale face. She knew she'd gone too far, and it was too late to turn back now. Her stomach churned as she recalled Crystal's calm, penetrating gaze, one that foretold precisely the fate Megan now faced. Suddenly, the interrogation room door opened. Another agent stepped inside, placing additional documents on the table. His voice was cold and decisive. Miss Parker, Tyler Jenkins has confessed everything. He stated clearly that you organized and led the entire operation, and he was merely following your instructions. Megan jolted upright, panic overtaking her as she turned sharply. He's lying. Tyler was the one. We have more than enough evidence to corroborate Tyler's account, the female agent interrupted, placing a USB stick firmly on the table. This contains video footage of your meeting with the drug supplier at a hotel 2 months ago. There's no denying it now. Megan felt every bit of air vanish from her lungs. All hope, even the faintest glimmer, disappeared completely. Her shoulders slumped, her voice reduced to a whisper of defeat. I was wrong. As these words left her lips, Megan broke down completely. All her arrogance, pride, and false glory shattered instantly, leaving behind only a frightened, vulnerable woman confronting the consequences of her own devastating choices. Meanwhile, at CIA headquarters, Crystal stood quietly in a secure conference room alongside Director Reynolds and senior intelligence agents. Reynolds turned toward Crystal, his expression serious, yet filled with deep respect. "You've done exceptional work, Agent Cole. You didn't just break up a major criminal network. You forced society to seriously confront the deeply embedded racial biases it's long ignored." Crystal bowed her head slightly, responding softly, but with quiet conviction. "That's precisely why I joined the CIA, sir. Not just to stop criminals, but to challenge the system itself, ensuring justice truly becomes something everyone can believe in. This is only the first step, sir. We still have much more work ahead of us. It's not just about changing laws, but about changing how each of us sees one another." Crystal's voice carried gentle conviction, her heart filled with pride and hope. Director Reynolds nodded solemnly, understanding the deep truth behind her words. "Yes, Crystal. Sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought in courtrooms, but in the hearts and minds of people." Crystal smiled faintly, aware that although this fight had ended, the broader struggle, breaking down the deep-seated prejudices within society, was just beginning. She felt a sense of readiness, knowing this was exactly the kind of change she had dedicated her life to fighting for. Meanwhile, at a federal detention center, Megan Parker sat alone in a small room, staring blankly at the wall. Her carefully crafted life had shattered into countless pieces, all the fame, the admiration, and the false security she'd enjoyed, gone in an instant. As Megan sat there, her mind replayed Crystal's calm voice in that meeting room, exposing every lie Megan had told herself. She jumped as the door opened abruptly. A guard handed her a small envelope without a word. "You've got mail," the guard said simply. "Maybe it'll help." Megan slowly unfolded the letter, her trembling hands barely able to hold the paper. She began to read, and her eyes widened in shock. "Megan, you've probably lost everything, and it feels like the end. But remember, even now, you still have a choice: to accept responsibility, to confront the truth, and maybe, even if it's difficult, to forgive yourself. It's never too late to change. Crystal Cole." Tears poured from Megan's eyes, blurring the letter's words. For the first time, Megan allowed herself to truly feel the depth of what she'd done, not just to Crystal or the others she'd hurt, but to herself. The illusion she'd chased had vanished, leaving only painful clarity behind. At the FBI training center months later, Crystal stood before a crowded auditorium filled with airline employees, security officers, and law enforcement agents. She wasn't there simply as a CIA operative. Today, she was a voice for change, shining a powerful light onto a problem that had remained hidden for too long. Today, I'm here because the issue isn't just Megan Parker or Tyler Jenkins. The issue runs much deeper. It's about how easily prejudice can be manipulated into something destructive. It's about the silence that enables wrongdoing to flourish. Crystal paused, her voice gentle yet resonant, touching every person in the room. Megan was once just like you, ambitious, hopeful, but she allowed prejudice and desperation to drive her choices. It's easy to judge her, but much harder, and far more important, to recognize the ways each of us may have silently contributed to a culture that allowed this tragedy to happen. The room fell silent, every face deeply moved by her words. A young flight attendant raised her hand, hesitant yet sincere. "What can we do to prevent this from ever happening again?" Crystal smiled warmly, encouraging everyone with genuine kindness. "We can start by paying attention, by speaking up when we see something wrong. It begins with each of us refusing to let prejudice, fear, or silence win." The auditorium erupted in heartfelt applause. Conversations flowed freely afterward, breaking down invisible barriers that had existed far too long. Crystal smiled quietly, knowing that while one story had ended, another, far more important, was just beginning. Thank you for watching and supporting this powerful story. Please take a moment to subscribe to the Aiva Stories channel, hit that like button, and share this video widely. Your voice and your actions make all the difference in creating a world where justice truly prevails. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next story. Back at the training academy, Crystal finished her speech to resounding applause. As she stepped off the podium, she was met with warm handshakes and heartfelt thanks from attendees. Just as she prepared to leave, CEO Richard Hamilton of Atlantic Airways approached, offering his hand in a firm handshake. Crystal, thank you for delivering such a profound and sobering lesson. From this day forward, we're committed to creating a workplace free from prejudice and injustice. Crystal met Hamilton's gaze with a gentle yet determined smile. Thank you, Mr. Hamilton. I truly believe things will get better from here. But words must always be matched by actions. The world will be watching, and so will we. Stepping outside the academy, Crystal paused for a moment, gazing upward at the wide-open blue sky. She knew that her mission was never truly over. Yet today, she had at least planted the first seeds of genuine change. Please keep watching, because this story isn't over yet. The journey ahead may be long, but sunlight is beginning to break through the storm clouds. Above all, justice and compassion will always prevail, no matter how challenging the road may be. 1 year after that fateful day, Crystal boarded a familiar Atlantic Airways flight, not as a covert CIA agent, but simply as a passenger visiting family. The moment she stepped onto the plane, a gentle, familiar voice greeted her warmly from behind. "Welcome aboard, Agent Cole." Turning around, Crystal smiled softly as she saw Yasmin Collins, now proudly wearing the uniform of senior flight attendant, eyes filled with sincerity and pride. "Thank you, Crystal," Yasmin said warmly. "You helped me find my voice again. Thanks to you, many of us who once stayed silent now dare to stand up for what's right." Crystal placed a comforting hand on Yasmin's shoulder, her voice filled with heartfelt gratitude. "No, Yasmin, you're the one who truly made a difference. I only opened the door. You were the brave one who stepped through it." In that moment, both women shared a profound belief in a brighter future, a future free from outdated prejudice. Crystal continued down the aisle, quietly observing other passengers who were now warmly and genuinely welcomed, regardless of skin color or status. Outside the airplane window, sunlight streamed warmly through the fluffy white clouds. Crystal smiled gently, feeling lighter than ever before. She understood clearly that real change begins with small actions and individual bravery. She believed deeply that every person, no matter how ordinary they might seem, has the power to create extraordinary change. Thank you for joining Aiva Stories on this emotional journey. In life, we may sometimes witness or even experience injustice and prejudice firsthand. But remember, each of us has the power to change that, through understanding, compassion, and the courage to speak up at the right moment. If today's story touched your heart, help us spread this powerful message to others. Please hit the like button, subscribe to the Aiva Stories channel, and don't forget to share this video with your friends, family, and community. Your small actions can spark big changes in the world. See you soon in our next inspiring story at Aiva Stories.